don't need to worry about checking the time. It's Holzer time. Today I'm really excited for a lot of reasons, and it's even surprising to myself some of what's come out that's happening with the particular supporter I want to introduce to you today. We have CSI, or the Construction Specifications Institute. They've been around for a long time in the industry. And the core of this whole industry, whether we like it or even know it, is communication. You know, it's about communicating the design needs. A design gets created. It's about tools to communicate that creation to the field to get assembled. And part of that communication, the facilitation of it, is we have to have ways to gather that information together. Classification systems. I know it's could be boring to some, but it's amazingly not to a lot of us. So CSI, that's really where they live. They have created long ago classification systems. I'll let them get into it a little bit more. But with that being, you know, so critical, that communication in our industry, making sure the right information is to the right people in the right way, and it's collected together and able to be. There's so much information. How do we know where to go find it? I remember, you know, actually just going with master format, I could go straight to spec section 6400, you know, when I was working in another firm years ago, and everything was there that I needed. So they've long been what I call a de facto standard. There's standards, there's ISO standards, which they delve in, but somewhat of a de facto standard is it was just a language almost that's been used in the industry. And they have adapted themselves. A lot of these institutions that have been around like this for a long time in this industry kind of maybe didn't evolve from this analog world to digital. And I'm real excited to see CSI has done that in terms of a new product they have that's called Crosswalk. I'll let them also talk to you more about Crosswalk in just a few minutes. But that adaptation is critical. That's why we're all here. That's why the AEC hackathons were formed to begin with, to hack this industry, come out with different ways of doing things that nobody ever even thought of before. So that's even more exciting that we now have them engaged. They're supporting the AEC hackathon community in a great way here, and having a kind of the fabric of this whole industry, the construction segments of it especially, here and supporting and participating in the AEC hackathons. Again, Crosswalk, what that does is blends together 3 classification systems of master format, uniformat, and omni-class. That being said, welcome Mark Dorsey, CEO of CSI, Rick Bawcum, CTO of CSI. So we love acronyms in this industry. Can you tell? CSI, CEO, AEC.
Oh, yeah. That's good, man. Just keep going. You're on a roll.
Yeah, well, actually, I have a talk coming up next week. I think it is that communication is the core of this industry. But a lot of the communication is these acronyms. So, you know, people say we need to have a Wikipedia of just industry acronyms. So
second only to the military, I think the construction industry is.
Yeah, that's right. Well, thanks for joining me today, guys. And my number one question, I can't wait to hear from you in you know, the overarching manner. What brought you to want to support the AEC hackathons in such a powerful way? What did you see that was going to be able to, number one, your contribution, other than just financial, you know, being here right now and participating through this week, what benefits could there possibly be for CSI?
Well, first, Steve, thanks for having us on board. We're really excited to be here, and I'll tee up a couple ideas and kick it over to Rick. But you know, for the benefit of the studio audience, Crosswalk is this bringing together of standards. So for those who aren't as steeped in master format, uniformat, and omniclass, basically it's a taxonomy of how all that construction information and processes are organized. And the way that developers would use that information, whether you're Autodesk or you're just trying to create an application for your own firm, would be we would sell you a book, and we might send you a spreadsheet, and then the 90s would call and say, hey, I want my development process back. So you remember those books that had a camel or a whale or an elephant on it, and you did have C# programming, and went, that's not going to work. And so when we created Crosswalk, and more to the point, Rick and his team developed it, one of the reasons that we wanted to put this together was to make it easier for people to use this industry standard. The ways in which people use that industry standard are unknown. So what better way to do it than to get some folks together and get them mucking about with this very new way of presenting these standards, and maybe create some ways that we hadn't thought of before, but it'll also give us some great feedback. And frankly, it gives CSI an opportunity to support the next wave of digital transformation in the construction industry, because I don't think it's a secret to anybody that the AECO community is one of the least digitized industries, period. So that's a little bit our contribution, but also support for a community that's trying to move us forward, make us more effective, more efficient. Rick, anything you'd like to add to that?
No, I think that covers quite a bit of it. I think as CSI has gone digital with the standards, and the opportunity to come to the hackathon and go to a global audience with the fabric that we built has been the main opportunity for me, because we're not building a consumer-based product. We're building a fabric to put into existing software applications and portals. That's our purpose and what CSI has put together. So, what better place than to take it to a bunch of folks who are working in the innovation space in one of the least digitized industries in the world, and give them an opportunity to see how this fabric can be pulled into what they're doing with their applications, and see how standards work for them. I mean, you said earlier, it's all about communication. We classify things every day. All of us do. You walk down the street and somebody tells you a cat's about to cross your pathway. You want to know if it's a kitten or a lion, right? So, we classify things all the time. So that's very important in the built environment for lots of reasons: safety, aesthetics, efficiency, all of those things.
Yeah, well, I really want to. Go ahead, Rick.
No, sorry, Steve. I didn't mean to. Rick touched on one thing, which is supporting a global community that's the AEC Hackathon community was also important to us. I think there's a tendency to think of ourselves as the U.S. market or even the North American market, but we know that construction projects happen globally, and facilitating that communication and supporting a community that's committed to that was very important to us at CSI.
That's a home run. I've talked about this. Every building product manufacturer in the U.S. of any great size, I mean, the primaries, they are all global entities, and they may be building toilets as one brand here and selling as another brand overseas, but they're dealing with all these standards, classification systems, energy efficiencies, green. These are all pieces of the same thing. This industry is, it is truly a global industry. Even a mid-size building product manufacturer here in the States is dealing in a global environment without a doubt. So one of the things I got so excited about is, well, actually there's two things with what you've done with Crosswalk. So for years, you guys were developing and evolving classification systems. And one of the challenges in the industry that I saw is every time you improved it, it created somewhat of a nightmare, because now we had two versions of the same classification system. It wasn't like we went from master format to OmniClass. No, we went from master format, way back 95 or master format 2014 or whatever to the next version. So once I had heard about this Crosswalk as an API, and me working for a platform that was a global building products platform, we saw the power of a company maybe in Europe or even in the US that wanted to go into the European market that typically only publish their information about their products as master format. Immediately, it's accessible in OmniClass through your API, as well as you're reinventing yourself. Even so, now as you update those standards of your own master format classification system, you have a way to machine learning or machine read the older potential products or whatever information you're looking at. Was that a fair statement?
Absolutely, Steve. When I got to CSI and realized that we were not only publishing a change in the standard every 2 years, construction projects don't work on that pace of play, especially big ones. I mean, you can scope the project and take 2 years and go through your environmental impact statements and everything you're thinking about trying to put together before you break ground. That can be years in the making. And so, we were hearing that back too. And the other issue, it takes so much effort to manually curate and cross-reference and, try to keep up. That what we were seeing is some companies were saying, we'll just use the old version of master format. We'll just use master format. Then I know people who were creating their own flat file spreadsheets to try to relate those to OmniClass and or Uniformat. And by the way, you're using Uniformat or Uniformat 2. And Crosswalk solves for all of that behind the scenes. So when you're looking up a product and a reference, you're ultimately going to be able to make that leap more easily. And I think the other element I would bring into this is when we're thinking about, let's take doors, for example, and openings. A door used to be, it's an obstacle to ingress or egress, right? Well, now, of course, it's security, it's electronically controlled, it can be a data gathering space. So which division does the door fit in? Is it in Division 8, related to openings? Yeah, but where else might it be? And so Crosswalk also enables not only between prior versions, but ultimately enables references to different areas of master format, Uniformat and OmniClass that you wouldn't be able to easily do if you're doing that all by hand.
So you're telling me you're going from many to one, potentially, relationally. You have many classifications. You could have the same building product classified under numerous classifications.
Absolutely. It's a one to many, a many to many, and a many to one. Because here's what happens: you're playing three-dimensional chess, Steve. So as the life cycle of the project progresses, specifiers and designers on the front end tend to be master format oriented. And as you progress to turnover, you've got building operators and facilities managers who want to see things more component driven, and that standard is Uniformat, right? So you're playing three-dimensional chess because you have not only the standard master format that progresses every 2 years roughly, you've got as I move into different phases of the project and operating the built environment, then I need a different standard because I'm looking at the same, you have to look at it as a different lens. I'm looking at the built environment now through a Uniformat lens or a Uniclass lens or one of the IFCs, which is on our roadmap somewhere down the road for looking at those things. So the idea is to create a translator. And again, the excitement for me about being part of the hackathon was because there are folks from all over the world working in all of those spaces, on the front end in design, on the back end in FM, and everything in between.
That was the goal of the first hackathon that we had in Menlo Park, was to there weren't many people that we say live on the bridge. We had all these amazing game developers and JavaScript and website and graphic artists, that knew what technology could do. And then we had this whole industry that knew what they needed to do, in getting a building built, but the two never really used to meet. So right. How do we help? And so the idea is to lock together an electrical trade partner, superintendent with an architect and maybe an engineer, along with some game developer or software developer, and come up with solutions. That was the goal. But I had an aha moment. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Steve. I had a point to follow up on that, but go ahead.
I had a big aha moment when you were talking about having multiple of one of the things coming from the building product manufacturers digital content world. there are marketing departments at major building product manufacturers that sweat bullets trying to figure out what master format number to classify their products at. I mean, but because it could fit, just like you just said, so many different ones. With Crosswalk, I think they have a great opportunity to reach all those avenues simultaneously, if I understand.
You're spot on. I think the power of this is that I'm not just tagging you with a master format number and title, for example, right? I'm giving you all the master format numbers and titles that apply to that product. Plus, I'm giving you omniclass numbers and titles and categories, and I'm giving you uniform. So you think about the richness of that tag. To us, it's a tagging problem, right? Mm-hmm. Rather than the one-dimensional tagging of the 95 version of master format going into your product catalog, now you can put a much richer set of tagging so that it shows up in searches. Whether you're looking at it through the omniclass lens or you're looking at it through uniformat or master format, your product can get tagged with all of that rich taxonomy now and show up in searches.
But it could also be tagged at what I would call the lowest or the most detailed level at the 8-digit level, let's say, and that could actually roll up into the 6-digit level so they don't miss out, in that, because that was the hand-wringing for a lot of marketing folks. Where do we put this at an 8-digit level? Shoot, that's so defined. And they may need that if they're working on a government project. But if they're doing, a hotel, that may only go to 6 digits, and they might get left out. They won't be found in the search.
Yep.
So Crosswalk.
Well, the hand wringing was palpable, Steve, because when we talk to our own people, our own volunteers, they'd say, "Well, you can't go any further out from a number of digits standpoint." Well, that, in an analog world, when you're having to cross-reference, which is going to create all sorts of problems. You got manual processes, delays in information, format issues, incompatible systems, all those missing integrations. Well, now that can change. And one of the things that I personally think is really cool is, CSI being a nonprofit, we can live in that agnostic space and play with all the different BPMs and software manufacturers and software developers so that this information can flow. So they retain their competitive advantage, but what we provide is a service to the industry that enables all of this information to flow from one application to another. So that specifiers, contractors, subcontractors, BPMs, facilities managers, and designers, they don't have to hand as much stuff off via paper as they used to. And I think one way to think about it is, by the way, it's not that the old way of doing specs completely dies and goes away immediately. We're still going to see that happen, and spec writing will be a thing. But on the other hand, as was pointed out to me, if you're 3D printing a building, the spec is built in the code.
Exactly.
So it's got to be done right, and that's a space I think we were missing completely as an industry.
I've spoke on this. It's actually inverted on its head. The specs are derived out of the model as opposed to the specs driving what gets modeled.
That's the gap we hope we can fill, because we see things like some of the great new VR and AR technologies that we're seeing now that are based on things like Revit models, for example. We're seeing some great dimensional models being built and being presented on VR and AR platforms. But when you start looking at some of the classification information that'll drive how it gets built to materials and all those things that get delivered, a lot of that stuff is missing. And it's because the classification piece of it was so hard.
Yeah.
So they're doing the parametric stuff, and then when you get to the classification piece of it, the more mundane data work, some of that stuff is missing. We think we're a bridge to solve for that.
Well, another piece that gets lost often, if an organization is focused only on the U.S., which the CSI is not, is that there's a lot of other platforms other than Revit that are primary modeling platforms in other parts of the world. ArchiCAD is huge. And all kinds of CATIA, there's so many other systems that are also being leveraged or utilized. Tekla, you're able, with this product, it doesn't really matter what platform someone is using as a modeling platform. it's able to be, even with your API, it's able to be leveraged. I would hope as a CTO.
Because we're not forcing you to speak the same standard,
Right.
right? Necessarily, you can start with a spec-based or spec-oriented standard with master format, and again, you can pivot later in the cycle, the project delivery cycle, to OmniClass or Uniformat or other standards that we'll add later.
Well, I have another challenge, or not challenge, but a question. But first, Mark, a minute ago, I interrupted you. I want to come back to, if you still have that thought, if I haven't totally wiped it out.
No, actually, it wound up coming up through the conversation, which is great. But I think what triggered for me in that early on, Rick referred to this as a translator, and all of a sudden it completely went Star Trek and the universal translator. And if that the holy grail, I think, just in my short time in this industry, has been the communication of product information, particularly as relates to BIM.
Yeah.
If you don't have something like Crosswalk, that holy grail around BIM doesn't happen, because rightfully so, software companies are going to want you to use their software to gain access to certain information. But there's a whole nother level of metadata that can be used to facilitate between different applications, because I come from the association space, and Rick has played in that space as well. The association management system that was supposed to be able to do all things for you everywhere at any time. Yeah, I mean, it could run a meeting, it could charge you for your dues, it could be your store, it can design your office space, it can work miracles. And I see the construction industry striving to try to do those things, but ultimately you're going to have best of breed in specific application areas. And if what we can do is facilitate good content between those applications, much less within the application, then we have done a service for the industry, and serving the industry is what CSI is about.
Yeah, I use the term ecosystem for years. I mean, that's really, even a single facility becomes an ecosystem when it's not just drawings, it's actually the data. And so how does that ecosystem, how does it have its own mesh or web that is able to cross across disciplines and trades and disciplines in functionality, disciplines in time even of a facility? So yeah, it's really exciting, what you're speaking of. And when you when you were talking earlier about the spreadsheets, even of this version versus that version of master format, or crossing over to Uniclass, I have a Holzerism for that, and that's brain damage. That causes incalculable brain damage. But the thing is, a lot of people don't recognize the cost to the industry, the actual dollars that cost to manage that kind of information in that way. It's insurmountable. And that's what this type of thing, that's why I say you guys have, as an institution, there's a lot of institutions that have gone by the wayside because they've not adapted. And I really commend you for taking what you've always done and figuring out how to make sure it's able to be consumed as digital consumption today. That's what is really the key.
Yeah, some of this was personal for me. I've been 40 years in the technology business, but I spent a little sidetrack and I bought a construction company and actually
not my fault. It's not my fault.
It's all your fault, Steve. So I spent 6 or 7 years running a construction firm, and I saw how complicated communication got in that fragmented industry with subs and master subs and master contractors and building product manufacturers, and I saw how inefficient that whole handoff in communications was. So it became pretty personal to me in that space. So it was visceral for us.
Well, we got just less than 10 minutes left, but I want to know what other secrets you guys got in the closet there that you're working on? Any other initiatives? What other things that you could tease us with that CSI has growing out of its garden?
Well, this is the big one, to be sure. Apart from we're teeing up online learning and those sorts of things and all the other things an association does, and we have a very robust online community. And several of those communities are available to anybody. So go to csiresources.org. You'll meet people from all across the country and around the world. So that's my shameless plug for CSI. Got to do that. But in terms of Crosswalk, Rick talked briefly about the roadmap, and right now we're just at the beginning of this thing. I mean, it's one thing to put these standards together in an API, and you can kind of go, man, okay, that's great. But what happens when we get to the next level? How do we help somebody solve, your Monday morning problem, which is, again, one of the reasons that we're, here to support the hackathon communities, to find ways that we can help developers, as well as, in particular, the end users support those problems. So, Rick, I might just ask you to talk a little bit about what we see coming down the horizon in terms of both the AI side, machine learning, and supporting augmented reality and virtual reality design, as well as blockchain plays that we see coming down the pike. That's if this goes well, that's what's next.
Nice.
So Mark just dropped all the buzzwords that are important to this crowd, right? So
that's his job.
Yeah, exactly.
To make the buzzwords happen.
So Crosswalk, as it exists today, is the first stop on a 4-stop roadmap, right? So, a Crosswalk as it exists today is about the network effect. How do I start getting data and information flowing and classified in the right way? Mark just pointed out that there are 3 more stops that we're looking at that we are starting to pivot towards, and one of those is machine learning. Now that I've got all this data and metadata flying about, what can I do to help those applications and portals be more effective and improve their user experience? Things like upvoting, crowdsourcing, others also specified this product fits in this category or that. Those kinds of things are there. And that's a function of these really smart machines that are coming online now, and services that are available. Blockchain, there's a lot of things we can do in blockchain. I know, again, owning a construction company, it was always a question of where's the latest and greatest, whatever, change order, blueprints, whatever. There's a lot of stuff in version control that the blockchain, not Bitcoin, but the blockchain can solve for in that space.
The term I use in for this industry is I call it distributed ledger. And then first I say, what is distributed ledger? Because if I say blockchain, they think I'm talking about Bitcoin or some other, and it's not. It's a whole technology that really can provide the complete, I call it the DNA. The DNA, the fingerprint of everything that's happened to any piece of information within that digital twin, which is other things we're talking about. So anyway.
I think of it as the fabric there. And what's needed in the space is somebody to operate the fabric. There's a lot of people working at the encryption ends of it, the edges of blockchain. So there's a place that CSI can play in that space. And then the final stop on our roadmap is everything IoT. So all of the stuff, all the really smart stuff, the sensors that are out there. In fact, I talked to a company today that I got so excited about because they built smart trash cans to go in this. I sit in Alexandria, Virginia, where there's one of the city trash cans sitting on the corner there, and they're doing things like environmental sensing. They're getting temperature data, air quality data. All of those kinds of things are going to start appearing on the street corners of our cities, and somebody needs to operate the fabric to make all of that come together.
Wow. Hashtag smart trash. You heard it here first.
All right. Great. This is super exciting. I mean, with what you just said too, it's super exciting to have you guys engage in this AEC Hackathon community. Just even what you're talking about, we were in Austin a few years ago. They gave us City Hall for the hackathon, the physical one, for the weekend, and they gave us data on their recycling centers, all of these environmental aspects, and that's what they were looking for. Exactly what they saw, and that's the smart cities. I mean, that's the whole thing that wires this smart city stuff together. So, well, guys, I'm really excited. I learned a lot, even about what you have going on, what you have going forward. It's obvious that you are perpetuating the efforts of CSI and going to remain a real relevant piece of this industry and helping us adapt it out. So thank you, Mark and Rick. Thanks again, guys. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you being part of the AEC Hackathon community. And once it's kind of, what's the song you can check out, but you can never leave. So
now we're going to go back to Hotel California, I guess.
Yeah. Well, that's where I live. Is Hotel California.
Well, we're glad to be a part of it, Steve, and we're excited about the traction that we're seeing out there and with the challenges and everything else. So glad to be a part of it.
Great.
Yep. Thank you, Steve, and thanks to everyone out there in Hackathon community.
Absolutely. We'll see you around this week.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.